Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena. This week it's time for us to finally leave Grenada and head to Trinidad. That's an 80-mile overnight passage. When we get there, we're going to prepare the boat to haul out, but before we can go, we need to replace this rudder bushing. My name is Mess, this is my wife Ava. I've spent the last 5 years on a somewhat extensive refit of our 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That was a DIY fun-packed adventure complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, rebuilding the entire deck, gutting and subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, painting the top sides, and a ton of other projects. The summer of 2021 we started cruising full time. Now we're finally ready to begin our adventure. Long story short, back in Mindelo in Cape Verde we had a new rudder bushing made. It looks a lot like this one, but it's a different material. That material seems to swell a lot when the bushing gets wet or hot, and that causes a lot of friction on our rudder stock. I think for our 80-mile passage to Trinidad, we're going to be better off with our old rudder bushing. The housing for that bushing is the shiny stainless down there. Unfortunately, to get to it, I have to crawl in there. Once I had folded myself into the cockpit locker, access is actually not that bad. There are just 4 bolts securing the housing for the rudder bushing. Having removed these 4 bolts, the big surprise of the day revealed itself. The Mindelo bushing had swelled to such an extent that it had created a watertight seal around the rudder stock. Getting the housing pulled off of the rudder stock proved to be interesting, but after copious amounts of fiddling about, the bushing finally let go. In order to fit the new old bushing, I first needed to remove the Mindelo bushing. Thinking it might shrink in the freeze, I left it in there for a couple of hours. Alas, after copious amounts of whacking, there was no option but to start cutting the bushing. Armed with nothing but a hacksaw blade, I set to work, and after about an hour of oh glorious sawing, it looked like I was finally through and could go back to whacking. Speaking of whacking, getting the old new bushing back in the housing proved to be a delightful challenge. I used a piece of plywood to protect the bushing and just gave it everything I had. The new old bushing is in place and the steering is now feather light. Of course, there is a reason I replaced it in the first place, and that's because there's a little bit too much play in the new old bushing. But in this case, I think a little bit too loose is better than death grip tight. This is the Mindelo bushing, and I have no idea what this material is. It's of course in no way suited to a bushing that's going to be in a wet, warm environment. It's almost like some kind of cloth and resin or something, but maybe somebody in the comment section can tell me what this stuff is. Whatever this material is, like I said, it's definitely not the right choice for a bushing material for a sailboat, but I'm sure Paulo in the machine shop in Mindelo did the best he could with the materials he had available. When we come back from the US, I'm going to be traveling with about a foot worth of Delrin rod so I can get new ones made in Trinidad out of Delrin.
We took a break from the boat and went on a little delicious land adventure to a chocolate factory with our friends Bruno, Gustavo, and Tim. We drove to Belmont Estates, which is about 38 kilometers north of Prickly Bay. The plantation is located on a beautiful farm in the middle of the forest and has been around since the late 1600s. We started the tour off in the beautiful stone fermentation building, where we were given a little taste of warm cocoa and discussed local fruit like this prickly annatto, a citronella fruit, and of course the infamous cacao seeds. The process of turning cacao into chocolate has not changed very much in the last 200 years. Here at Belmont Estates they even use many of the same tools, like this basket to collect cacao pods from the fields and this cacao knife to remove the pods from the trees. Uh-oh, watch out, our friend Gustavo looks pretty comfortable touching that knife. To my surprise, the white outer fruit of the cacao seed is really sweet. We each got to try some, but you have to be careful because if you bite down too hard, you get to that bitter cacao seed. Once the pod is picked and the cacao seeds are separated from the pod, they are left to ferment for 6 days, rotating down these fermentation boxes. Then the seeds are taken outside to dry in the sun. Cleverly enough, the boxes are on these long rails so they can easily be pulled in and out of the sun. Believe it or not, chocolate starts off as this little white flower, then starts to fruit, and that little green guy will eventually grow into a cacao pod. Uh-oh, I think this little guy or gal is patiently waiting for their chocolate to be ready. Then we went back inside and got to check out some older equipment, like this giant cacao seed tumbler and this cool sorting machine that they no longer use. We then headed uphill to where the real magic happens. The chocolate factory. This is where the cacao seeds are processed into chocolate, spinning in these mixers for 6 days until they are ground down into a silky, smooth consistency. Then they are stored as these giant blocks in chocolate and white chocolate, where they will wait until it's their turn to be turned into delicious candy bars. After the tour, we got to try some samples, and this white chocolate with cacao nibs mixed in was by far our favorite. We may have gotten a bar or two to bring back to the boat.
We've had a fantastic time here in Grenada over the last 6 weeks, and we've met a ton of really cool people. But I've been keeping an eye on the weather for the last week or so, and today is our best option for making the jump down to Trinidad. We've already cleared customs and immigration and all of that, so we're ready to go. But before we do, let me show you where we are and where we're going to be going. Up here is the United States, down here is South America, and if we zoom in on Grenada right here in the middle, we are here on the southern tip, and we want to go down to Trinidad. As I've mentioned, that's about 80 miles, and there's nothing too treacherous looking on the chart. There is a couple of oil rigs in the middle of nowhere that we'll have to make sure we don't hit, but other than that, it should be fairly smooth sailing. Our first stop in Trinidad is going to be a small anchorage right here, not too far away from Port of Spain. Once we've dropped the hook there, we're going to request health clearance so we can, when we get that, tie up to this little pontoon here at this yard. This is where we've booked our haul out for next week. The customs and immigration process for Trinidad so far seems like the most complicated one we've had here in the Caribbean, but we might get back to that a little bit later in the video. In terms of wind, we should see around 17 knots, gusting up to 25, so that's perfectly fine. Then if we look at the sea state, that should be about 5 feet with a period of 7 seconds, so that's decent. It's not super good, not super bad. And then best of all, if we switch to this forecast here, we can see that we shouldn't really get into any too serious thunderstorms, because there's been a lot of thunderstorms here lately, and I'm assuming that's because it's the rainy season, but it would be nice to avoid those on the passage, and it looks like once we get past 10 o'clock in the evening, we should be all clear. The last step in my little passage planning here is to check marine traffic, just to see if we're going to be passing a ton of traffic, but this looks very manageable. That's it, everything looks good, so let's get underway to Trinidad.
We are 8 miles from Grenada. We've been running the engine because we wanted to top off the batteries and use the water maker, but we are under sail now and there's not that much wind, so we're going like 4 or 5 knots, but that's okay. It'll still get us into Trinidad around like 8:30, 9 in the morning.
I'm happy to report that the new old bushing is performing flawlessly. The steering seems to be perfect.
Yeah. And I think we're feeling a little bittersweet about leaving Grenada. We had a really nice time.
Yeah, and it's always hard leaving a place like right as you start making friends there, then it's time to leave.
Yeah, there's a really great cruisers community, and just like from the minute we got there, we got to meet up with Odd Life, and Becca and Zach were there, and then we ran into our friends Bruno and Gustavo, and so it was just a nice place, but we need to get our stainless done. So off to Trinidad we go.
Yep. We've made it about 15 miles from Grenada now. Everything is chugging along, the sun is slowly starting to set, and we've just had dinner. And what better way to celebrate that than talk about piracy? If we zoom in somewhere right around the oil rigs, there is a little icon there. That is a piracy icon. The warning on the chart plotter is back from 2016, 2017, something like that. But back then, on the rum line between Grenada and Trinidad, there were multiple incidents of piracy against smaller sailboats. I haven't heard about anything more recent than that, and the fingers crossed. But just to be on the safe side, I've switched our AIS into silent mode. So that means we're receiving AIS information from other boats, but we're not transmitting. From what I read on the chart plotter, the incidents of piracy back in 2016-17, they were all during the day in nice calm weather, and we're going to be passing by that area in the middle of the night. So yeah, I think we'll be fairly safe. I was hoping to get a sunset shot for the video, but yeah, the sun is already gone.
It's 8 o'clock and Mads just went down for his first sleep shift. We're gonna do our classic 3 hours on, 3 hours off, but we're averaging about like 15, 16 knots of wind, which is good, and we're going about like 4.5, 5 knots, so not too bad. We have 56 miles to go. And yeah, it's pretty quiet out here. I'm seeing that there's 3 boats out there. One of them is on the AIS. It's going 13 knots, so it seems like it's a big boat. But the other 2, they're not on the AIS, so I will just keep my eye on that. But other than that, things are going along smoothly.
The next morning we tried a couple of times to hail North Post Radio as a part of our arrival procedure. North Post Radio, this is sailing vessel Athena, Athena, Athena. The first couple of times there were no response. We then got a response and switched to channel 23 and got a horrible signal.
North Post Radio, this is Athena.
After switching to channel 25, the signal improved dramatically.
I need to close your flotan upon a safe arrival to your destination via email. And do not hesitate to contact North Post Radio if any assistance is required. Over.
Will do. Thank you so much. Over.
North Post Radio 9 Yankee Lima, ship to channel 16. Out.
As soon as we got into calmer water, I raised our Q flag to signal that we have yet to clear in. So far, so good. We have made it to the next step in our clearing in adventure. We have grabbed a mooring ball here right outside of Peak's Yachts, where we're going to be hauling out next week. To give you an idea of the complete extent of the experience, yesterday when we had cleared out of Grenada, we emailed our clearing out documents to Peaks here in Trinidad, and they submitted those documents to the relevant authorities. And then before arriving here, as you saw, we had to call North Post Radio on the VHF. After having picked up the mooring ball, we called Peaks to let them know that we were here, and then they've contacted the authorities here to get us a health clearance. Now, once we have that health clearance, we can then go ashore and actually go to customs and immigration. This is by far the most complicated clearing in procedure we've encountered in the Caribbean so far, and I'm really glad that Peaks are here to handle a big part of the communication with the authorities. The passage here was pretty uneventful. We had one squall, and most annoyingly, the winds shifted around to the south, so we did have to motor a little bit this morning. But other than that, it was pretty smooth sailing. There's one thing we noticed as we got closer to Trinidad though. We've been spoiled with nice blue water the last few months, and this stuff, well, it's kind of almost black looking, or a very dark brown. It is super industrial here where the yards are, so I wasn't going to go swimming anyways, but the blue water definitely looks more inviting. It's the next morning and our health clearance finally came in. So this morning we went to see the office here at Peaks, and well, I can't really show you the documents because they've got all kinds of personal details on them, but we've got 2 stacks of paper here, one for immigration, one for customs. I've just counted the one for immigration, and it's like 16 or 17 pieces of paper. And as you can see by the length of the two different stacks, it's not the same forms either. They both have different forms. So yeah, I am really glad we had Pete to help with organizing all of the documents and the communicating with the authorities. Speaking of the authorities, we are just about to head over to see immigration first and then customs. And well, there's one thing that needs to change, because apparently I am not allowed to wear shorts, and Ava also should cover her shoulders and nothing that goes above the knee. I can't express in mere words how excited I am to have to wear long pants in this blistering freaking heat, but it is the way apparently. Oh, this feels very unnatural, and also we're not supposed to wear anything that shows our feet. And just like that, the Sweaty Express, or what will soon be the Sweaty Express, is ready to head to immigration. Besides it being a long time since we've worn long pants, it's also the first time in a lot of months that Athena's been tied up to land. At first glance, Peaks looks very neat and tidy. That makes a big difference in feeling good about leaving your boat somewhere, and I've got a really good feeling about Peaks. We're about halfway into our walk, and Ava spotted a boat from Michigan.
Traverse City, cherry capital of the world. Well, now I don't know if it's cherry capital of the world, but that's where you go to get your cherries.
I know this is a weird thing to comment about, but this is like the nicest road we've seen in months. Completely smooth, no potholes, no weird lines, perfect road.
And just a little fun fact, they also drive on the wrong side, which is the left side of the road here, which we didn't know. But now we do.
It's all done. We are now officially cleared in. We've done customs and immigration. I think immigration took about 20 minutes and we were only people in there.
Yeah.
And customs took 5 minutes maybe.
Yeah. But at Peaks, they had all of our papers like together and organized really well. So we just had to bring that big pile of papers, and it was so smooth.
Yeah, I will say if you come here and you stay at Peaks or Power Yachts and Power Boats, I'm sure they do the same thing. Mm-hmm. It is a really nice help to have them organize the documents, because it is a lot of documents. Now we just got to try and make it back to the boat before the rain rolls in.
And I don't want to jinx things, but I feel like this is going to be like the best place to get a bunch of boat work done. I mean, there's just like boat work in the air. People are working on boats everywhere. There's like tons of services we walked past just walking here.
Yeah, and that is also the reputation of the place. Like if you need to get boat work done, this is a really good spot for it.
Yeah.
We're all set here in Peaks. Now we haul out next week, so that means there's a bunch of stuff we need to get ready. We need to pickle the water maker. We need to build a little adapter doodad so we can install a window air conditioning unit so we can cool down the boat when we're up on the hard, because of course our fancy Dometic air conditioning is water cooled, so it won't work when we're up on the hard. We also need to start getting quotes for the stainless work we want to get done, stuff like that. I'm excited to swing back into DIY mode, and that slowly starts next week. So we'll end this week's video here, and we hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for a bit of hauling out fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video,
please remember to leave a like.
See you!